Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that, for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately. But I play with wonderful expression.
Yes, sir.
Lane, have you got the cucumber sandwich cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Oh. And by the way, Lane, I saw from your book that on Thursday night when Lord Shorman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I've often observed that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens, is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I've had very little experience of it myself up to the present, and I've only been married once. That was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I'm much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir, it is not a very interesting subject, and I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, then what is the use of them? They seem, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure. What should bring one anywhere? Really, Algernon, must you wear that horrid mask?
Of course. Spanish flu waits for no man, Ernest.
Eating as usual, I see, Algie.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshments at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people.
And who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbors.
Got nice neighbors in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your country, is it not?
Shropshire? Oh, yes, of course. Hello. Why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta. And Gwendolyn.
Oh, how perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well. However, I am afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolyn is perfectly disgraceful. It's almost as bad as the way Gwendolyn flirts with you.
I'm in love with Gwendolyn. I've come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you said you come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. It is romantic to be in love, but there's nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. Then the excitement is all over. The essence of romance is uncertainty. If I ever get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
Oh, I have no doubt about that, dear Algie. The divorce court was specially invented for people like you.
Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. I ordered them specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you have been eating them all the time.
That is quite a different matter. She is my aunt. Here, have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolyn.
Oh. And very good bread and butter it is, too.
Yes, but you need not eat it as if you're going to eat it all. You're not married to Gwendolyn already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with.
That is nonsense.
It isn't. It's a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary amount of bachelors one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent.
My dear fellow, Gwendolyn is my first cousin. And before I can allow you to marry her, you will first have to clear the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? I don't know anyone named Cecily.
Bring me this cigarette case Mr. Worthing left here the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say that you've had my cigarette case this whole time? I wish to goodness you'll let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually short on cash.
There's no good offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
That is rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, it makes no matter, for now that I look at the inscription inside, I find the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Perhaps, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone by the name of Cecily, and you told me you didn't know anyone of the name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt.
Yes, charming old lady she is too. Just give it back to me, Algie.
Yes, but why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt? From little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. That is certainly a matter that an aunt should be able to decide for herself. For heaven's sakes, give me back my cigarette case.
Yes, but why does your small Aunt Cecily call you her dear uncle? From little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. Why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It's Earnest.
It isn't Earnest. It's Jack.
But you've always told me it was Earnest. I mean, you look as if your name was Earnest. You were the most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my life. Why? It's even on your cards. Mr. Ernest Worthing, before the Albany Hotel. I'll keep this as proof that your name is Ernest if you ever attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for why your small Aunt Cecily calls you her dear uncle. Come, old boy, you'd much better have the whole thing out at once.
My dear Algie, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist.
Go on, tell me the whole truth. I may let you know that I've always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of the fact now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
I'll tell you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now, produce your explanation and pray make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle from motives of respect that you cannot possibly begin to appreciate, lives with me in the country under the charge of her esteemed governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You're not going to be invited. I will tell you quite candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that, my dear fellow. I have Bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now, go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, when one is placed in the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. As such, I've always pretended to have a younger brother of the name Earnest, who lives in London and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algie, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. No, my dear Ernest, what you really are is a Bunburyist. In fact, you're one of the most advanced Bunburyists I've ever known.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Earnest, so that you may be able to go down into town whenever you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid known as Bunbury, so that I may be able to go down to the country whenever I choose. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't have the opportunity of dining with you tonight at Willis's, for I've been really engaged to dine with Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
But I haven't asked you to dine anywhere with me tonight.
I know, you are really bad about sending invitations. It's very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
No, I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. See, I dined there last week on Monday, and once a week's enough to dine with one's own relations. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunbury. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolyn accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother, and I strongly advise you to do the same with your invalid friend who has the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever get married, which Seems to me extremely problematic. You will want to know Bunbury too. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
That is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolyn, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
For heaven's sakes, don't try to be so cynical.
Oh, that must be Aunt Augusta. The only relatives, or creditors, ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I can get her out of the way for 10 minutes so that you may have the opportunity for proposing to Gwendolyn, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are charming today.
I am always charming, am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I'm not that. It will leave no room for future developments, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we're a little late, Algernon. I was obliged to call on dear Lady Hareberry. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered she looked quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Gwendolyn, won't you come and sit here?
Thanks, Mama. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens, Lane, why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers on the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir, not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I am greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers. Not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. Thank you. Now as to tonight's dinner.
I am afraid, Aunt Augusta, I will have to give up the opportunity of dining with you tonight after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Lord Bracknell would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
It is, I need hardly say, a terrible disappointment to me, but the fact of the matter is I've just had a telegram saying that my poor friend Bunbury is dreadfully ill again.
It is very strange this Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. I should be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and we'll want something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the night when everyone has practically said whatever they had to say, which in most cases probably was not much.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he's still conscious, and I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. I'll run over the program I've drawn out for you if you'll kindly step into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful. Gwendolyn, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mama.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else.
Well, I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mama has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I have met you, I have admired you more than any other girl I have met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of that fact. As for me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals, and my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment that Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
Oh, my own Earnest.
But you don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Earnest.
But your name is Earnest.
Yes, I know, but supposing it was something else, do you mean to say that you couldn't love me then? Personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I am not much fond of the name Ernest. I don't think it suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I must say that I think there are much other nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, a charming name.
Jack? No, there is very little music in the name Jack. Really, the only safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at we must get married at once. There's no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. You know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you are not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it's only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn!
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you have been about it. I'm afraid you've had very little experience in how to propose.
Mr. Worthing, rise, sir, from the semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mama, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mama.
Pardon me? You are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise. Pleasant or unpleasant as the case may be, it is hardly a matter she could be allowed to arrange for herself. And now I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I'm making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me in the carriage below.
Mama.
In the carriage, Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn, the carriage!
Yes, Mama.
You may take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell, but I prefer to stand.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men. However, I am quite ready to enter your name should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I've always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should either know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I'm pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 pounds a year.
That is satisfactory.
I also have a house in the country with some land, of course, attached to it about 1,500 acres, I believe. But I don't depend on that for my real income. In fact, as far as I can tell, the poachers are the only ones that make anything out of it.
A country house? You have a town house, I hope. A girl with a simple and spoiled nature like Gwendolyn could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I do own a home in Belgrave Square that is let to the year by Lady Bloxham. Of course, I can get it back at 6 months' notice.
What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. However, that could easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
Well, I'm afraid I really have none. I'm a liberal unionist.
Oh, they count as Tories. They dine with us or come in the evening at any rate. Now to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I am afraid I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth.
Well, I am afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost my parents, but it would be nearer to the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I'm not exactly sure who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of a very charitable and kindly disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket to Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
Where did the charitable gentleman who had this first-class ticket for the seaside resort find you?
in a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was found in a handbag, a somewhat large cloth handbag with handles to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
And what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born or at any rate bred in a handbag, whether it has handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to? I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce at any rate either parent of either sex at any moment.
Well, I don't see how I can manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It is in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You could hardly imagine that I would dream of allowing my only daughter, a girl brought up with utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel? Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning. Oh, for heaven's sake, stop playing that ghastly tune, Algie.
Didn't it go all right, old boy? You don't mean to say that Gwendolyn refused you? Oh, that is most ill-natured of her.
Oh, Gwendolyn is as right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is a perfect gorgon. I'm not really sure what a gorgon is, but I am quite certain that Lady Bracknell is one. In any case, she is a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. You don't think that Gwendolyn could become like her mother in about 150 years, do you, Algie?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That's his.
Oh, is that clever?
It's perfectly phrased and quite as true as any observation in civilized life should be. By the way, did you tell Gwendolyn about your being Earnest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't the quite sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl like Gwendolyn.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Earnest?
Oh, that is all right. For at the end of the week, I shall have got rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy, quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. The kind of thing that runs in families. You would much better say a severe chill.
Very well. My poor brother Ernest to be carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill.
But I thought you said that Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest. Won't she feel his loss a good deal?
Oh, Cecily's not some silly romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She's got a capital appetite, goes on long walks, and pays no attention at all to her lessons.
I would rather like to see Cecily.
I will take very good care that you never do. She's excessively pretty and is only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
One doesn't blurt these things out to people. Cecily and Gwendolyn are perfectly certain to be extremely great friends once they have met. I'll bet you anything you like that half an hour after they have met, they will be calling each other sister.
Women only do that when they have called each other a lot of other things first.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algie, kindly leave the room. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't think I can allow this at all.
Algie, you always adopt a strict, immoral attitude towards life. You aren't quite old enough to do that.
My own one.
Ernest, we may never be married, but although Mama may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else and marry often, nothing she can do can possibly deter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear Gwendolyn.
Say au revoir, but not goodbye, for parting brings a bitter sigh. The past is gone, the memory gives one clinging thought. The future lives, our duty burns, love must not leave. What might have been, and
shall live for years, though past is dead. This one goodbye may be our last. The word is spoke, the die is cast, but still my heart throbs wild with pain. And though we near shall meet again, say our revoir, but not goodbye. Though past is dead, love cannot die. 'Twere better far had we not met. I love you then, I love you yet.
My darling Ernest, the story of your romantic origin, as related to be my mama with unpleasant comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature, and your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Herefordshire.
There is good postal service, I suppose? It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
My own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algie, you may return now.
Thanks. I already have.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, my own one.
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
We totally forgot to dance.
Bills. A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going bunburying.
Yep.
I hope tomorrow will be a good day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you are a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
Place, park, scene, dark, silvery moon is shining through the trees. Cast to me, you, sound of kisses floating on the breeze. Act 1 begun, dialogue, where would you like to spoon? My cue with you, underneath the silvery moon, by the light of the silvery moon, I want to spoon, the honey I
Cecily, your German grammar lesson is on the table. Pray it open at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German,
It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he is leaving for town.
Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious, I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is especially to be commended, and one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he often looks bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We could have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I'm sure you certainly would. You know German and geology and things of that kind influence a man very much.
I'm not sure I would desire to reclaim him if I could. I am not in favor of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is a diary we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels in our library.
Do not speak ill of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me.
The good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means. However, the manuscript unfortunately was abandoned. I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. Ahem! To your work, child!
Oh, but I see Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a surprise.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust well?
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think a short stroll in the park with you would do her so much good, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
Yes, dear Miss Prism, I know that, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking of that and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
This is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has still not returned from town?
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He usually likes to spend his Sunday in London. He is not one whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all account that unfortunate young man his brother seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion merely, drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at the evening prayer?
I think, dear Doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk may do it some good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We may go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, you'll read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational.
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, horrid German. At the end of the rainbow there's happiness, and to find it how often I've tried. But my life is a race, just a wild goose chase, and my dreams have all been denied. Why have I always been a failure? What can the reason be? I wonder if the world's to blame. I wonder if it could be me. I'm always chasing rainbows, watching clouds drifting by. My schemes are just like all my dreams, ending in the sky. Some fellows look and find the sunshine, I always look and find the rain.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany. Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Uncle Jack was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he was anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Tell Mr. Ernest Worthing to come here. I suppose you had better have a room ready for him?
Yes, miss.
I've never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I'm so afraid he will look just like everyone else. He does.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You are under some strange misconception. I am not little. In fact, I am more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You, I see by your card, are Uncle Jack's brother. My cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I am not really wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that.
Well, if you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us in an all very inexcusable manner. Pretending to be really wicked, but then really being good all the time, that would be hypocrisy.
Well, I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now you mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, though I think that it has been very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I don't quite understand how you were here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
That is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go up by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I'm anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know, of course, how important it is to not keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But I still think you had better wait till Uncle Jack gets back. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. He has gone to buy your outfit.
Well, I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfits. He has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you will be requiring neckties. He is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, at dinner on Wednesday night, he said that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh well, this world is quite good enough for me, cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I am afraid I'm not that. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission, cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I have no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It's rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
That is because I'm hungry.
How foolish of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a rose for my buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
A Marshall Neal?
No, I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, cousin Cecily.
I don't think it can be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You were the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
And they are a snare that every sensible man wishes to be caught in.
I don't think I would care too much to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. You do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive except to his wife.
And often so I've been told, not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
I shall look for her by the fountain. You may wait for my return if you like, dear doctor.
A little maiden climbed an old man's knee, begged for a story. Do, uncle, please. Why are you single? ago. Where she is now, pet, you soon will know. List to the story, I'll tell it all. I believed her faithless after the ball. Bright lights were flashing in the grand ballroom. Softly the music playing sweet tunes. There stood sweetheart, my love, my own. I wish some water, leave me alone. When I returned, dear, there stood a man, kissing my sweetheart as lovers do. Down fell the glass pet, broken, that's all. Just as my heart was after the ball. After the ball is over, after the break of morn, after the dancers leaving, after the stars are gone, many a heart is breaking. If you could read them all, many a hope that has vanished after the ball.
Cecily is nowhere to be found on the grounds. I shall look for her indoors. Mr. Worthing!
Mr. Worthing,
This is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you till Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance?
Still leading his life of pleasure?
Dead.
Your brother Ernest dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
I offer you my sincere condolence, Mr. Worthing. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad. In Paris, in fact. I had a telegram sent to me last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
Severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. Will the interment take place here?
No, he seems to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that does not speak to any very serious state of mind at the last. But I trust you would wish me, no doubt, to make some mention to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday?
Ah, that suddenly reminds me. You mentioned christenings, I think, Dr. Chasuble. I suppose you know how to christen, right? I mean, of course, you are continuously christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I have often spoke to the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was unmarried, I trust, was he not?
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child, dear doctor. The fact is, I would like to be christened myself this afternoon. If you have nothing better to do, of course.
But surely you have been christened before.
I don't remember anything about it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
Well, I certainly intend to have. Unless you think I'm a little too old now.
Oh, not at all. The sprinkling and indeed immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
You need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that I believe necessary, or indeed advisable. At what hour would you wish the ceremony to take place?
Oh, I might trot round about 5. That would suit you.
Perfectly, perfectly. I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time. A case of twins that occurred on the outlying cottages of your own estate. Poor Jenkins the carter, a most hard-working man.
Oh, I don't see much fun in being christened along with other babies. It would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. But I must intrude upon your house of grief no longer. I only ask that you do not be too much bowed down by sorrow. What seem to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of the extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I'm pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes you've got on. Do go change them.
Cecily!
My child, my child.
I've got such a surprise for you. You'll never guess who's in the dining room. Your brother.
Who?
Your brother Ernest. He arrived a half an hour ago?
Oh, what nonsense. I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. I'll tell him to come out here, and you will shake hands with him. Won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
After we all had been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seemed to me peculiarly distressing.
Oh, good heavens!
Brother John, I have come down from town to tell you that I am very sorry for all the trouble that I've given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here is perfectly disgraceful, and he knows well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, who he goes to visit so often. And there must be some good in one who is kind to an invalid, who leaves the pleasures of London to sit by in a bed of pain.
Oh, he's been talking about Bunbury, has he? Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or about anything else. It is enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit that all the faults were on my side, but I must say that I think Brother John's coldness to me seems peculiarly painful. I expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering it's the first time I've ever been here.
Uncle Jack, if you do not shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never.
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
It's pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we should leave the two brothers alone.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful action today, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
You young scoundrel. Algie, you must get out of this place as soon as possible. I don't allow any bumbering here.
I have put Mr. Ernest's luggage in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that is all right?
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I am afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Miss Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Earnest has suddenly been called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I have not been called back to town at all.
Oh, yes, you have. Your duty as gentleman calls you back.
My duty as gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
Oh, I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily's a darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. Why don't you go up and change? It is perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for someone who is actually staying in your home for a whole week as your guest.
Oh, you are certainly not staying with me for a whole week as a guest or as anything else. You have got to leave by the 4:05 train.
I certainly won't leave so long as you are in mourning. That would be most unfriendly.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you're not too long. I never saw anyone take so long to get dressed in. With such little result.
Well, at any rate, it's better than being always overdressed as you are.
If I am ever occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by always being immensely overeducated.
Oh, I hope you will have a pleasant journey back to town. This bumbering, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it's been a great success.
Oh, I merely came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to send the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then we've got to part?
I am afraid so. It's a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from anyone whom one has known for such a brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but even a momentary separation from anyone to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Mrs. Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you will allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? I'd give anything to look at it. May I?
Oh, no. You see, it is just a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I've reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I'm quite ready for more. Don't cough, Ernest. I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think that you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily!
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
Tell it to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying until next week at the same hour.
Oh, I don't care about Jack. I don't care for anybody in the whole world but you.
I am dreaming, dear, of you, day by day. Even when the skies are blue, when they're gray, when the silvery moonlight gleams, still I wander on in dreams, in a land of love, it seems, just with you.
Let me call you sweetheart, I'm in love with you. Let me hear you whisper that you love me too. Keep the love light glowing in your eyes so true. Let me call you sweetheart, I'm in love with you. Longing for you all the while, more and more. Longing for the sunny smile I adore. Birds are singing far and near, roses blooming everywhere. You alone my heart can cheer, you, just you. Let me call you sweetheart, I'm in love with you. Let me hear you whisper that you love me too. Keep the love light glowing in your eyes so true. Let me call you sweetheart, I'm in love with you. Let me call you sweetheart, I'm in love with you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy, of course. Why, we have been engaged for the past 3 months.
For the past 3 months.
Yes, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And one who is very much talked about is always very attractive. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling, and when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last, worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or the other. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under this dear old tree here. And the next day I went out and bought this little ring in your name. And this is the bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
Did I get you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you have wonderfully good taste, Ernest. And this is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
My letters? But, my sweet Cecily, I have never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember almost too well that I was forced to write your letters for you.
Do let me read them, Cecily?
No, I couldn't. They would make you far too conceited. The three you wrote me after I had broken off the engagement are so beautiful and so badly spelled that even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
Was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was. On the 22nd of last March. You can see the entry if you like. Today I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I thought it better to do so. The weather continues to be charming.
Why on earth did you break it off? What had I done? I had done nothing at all. Cecily, I'm very much hurt indeed to hear that you broke it off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
Well, it would hardly have been a very serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
You dear romantic boy. I hope your hair curls naturally. Does it?
Yes, with a little help from others.
I'm so glad.
You'll never break off our engagement again, Cecily.
Well, I don't think I could now that I have actually met you. Of course, there is the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
Don't laugh at me, darling, but it has always been a childish dream of mine to marry a man who is called Ernest. There's something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Ernest.
But, my dear, do you mean to say that you could not love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Oh, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon.
Well, my sweet, loving little darling, I really don't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It's a rather aristocratic name. Half the chaps that get into the bankruptcy court are named Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algie, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I fear that I should not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Your rector here, I suppose, is thoroughly practiced in all the rites and ceremonials of the church?
Oh yes, Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man.
Then I must see him at once on a most important christening. I mean, on most important business.
Oh,
I shan't be away more than half an hour.
well, considering that we have been engaged since February the 14th and that I've only met you today for the first time, I feel that it is rather hard of you to leave me for such a period as a half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must record his proposal into my diary.
Miss Fairfax has just called to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Uncle Jack in his library?
Mr. Worthing went down in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray tell the lady to come here, and you may bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax. I suppose one of the many good elderly women who are associated with Jack in his philanthropic work in London. I don't much like women who are interested in philanthropic work. It is so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew! What a very sweet name. Something tells me we are going to be great friends. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me after we have just met. Pray, sit down.
I might call you Cecily, may I not?
If you wish,
And you will always call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
I suppose.
Then it is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education have been remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. Do you mind me looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolyn. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh no, I live here.
Really? Your mother or some female relative of advanced years resides here as well?
I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
My guardian, along with Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
I'm Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh, it is strange he never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I cannot say, however, that I met with with feelings of unmixed delight. I like you very much, Cecily. I've liked you ever since I met you, but I am bound to state that now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help express a wish that you were a little bit older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance, in fact, if I may speak candidly.
Oh, pray do. I believe that when anyone has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, then to speak with perfect candor, dear Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42, and more than unusually plain for your age. Ernest is the soul of truth and honor. Deception would be as impossible to him as disloyalty. But even the men of the noblest moral characters are still extremely susceptible to the physical charms of others. If it were not so, indeed, history would be quite unreadable.
Pardon me, Gwendolyn. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Well, it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm afraid to say that they have not been on good terms for quite a long time.
Ah, that accounts for it. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if a cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Now, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon?
Dearest Gwendolyn, Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
I'm afraid that there's been some slight error, Miss Cardew. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
You must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday at 5:30. If you care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read on the train. I'm afraid if it has been any disappointment to you, Miss Cardew, but I have the prior claim.
It would cause me more distress if I could tell you, Gwendolyn, that if it caused you any mental or physical anguish, but since Ernest proposed to you, he has clearly changed his mind.
If my poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever entanglement my boy may have gotten into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. In a situation of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is clear that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual, Mrs. Merriman.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
A great many. From top of one of the hills, you can see over 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town?
Quite a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you.
Sugar?
No, sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen at the best households nowadays.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the very sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt that you were false and deceitful. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
Well, it seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar nature to make in the neighborhood.
Ernest, my own Ernest.
Gwendolyn, darling.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
To dear little Cecily? Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there must have been some misconception, Gwendolyn. The gentleman whose arm is present around your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack! Oh!
Here is Ernest.
My own love.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To what young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolyn.
Yes, to good heavens, to Gwendolyn.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt as there was some slight error, Miss Cardew, for the gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh, are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I like. I could deny anything if I liked. But my name is certainly John. It has been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced upon both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet wronged Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, will you not?
Ugh.
There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is some sense of importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, I must tell you quite frankly that I have no brother Ernest, that I have never had a brother, and that I don't intend to have a brother, not even of any kind in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never had a brother of any kind?
Never. Not even of any kind.
I'm afraid it is quite clear, dear Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It's not a very pleasant situation for a young girl to find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
Certainly. Men are so cowardly, aren't they?
So, this ghastly state of things is what you call bumbering, I suppose.
Yes, and a perfectly wonderful bunbury it is too. In fact, it's the most wonderful bunbury I've ever had.
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to travel down to the country quite so often as you used to do, dear Algie. And not a bad thing, too.
Your brother is a little off color, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to escape down to London as often as your wicked custom was. And not a bad thing either.
As for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, you taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable. To say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
I can see no possible defense for your deceiving a thoroughly clever, brilliant young lady like Miss Fairfax.
I wanted
to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolyn. That is all. I love her.
I wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
There's certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
There's no likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax ever being united.
How can you sit there calmly eating muffins when we are in the middle of this horrible trouble that I can't make out? You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. One should always eat muffins quite calmly.
I say it's perfectly heartless that you're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I'm in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me.
Well, that is no reason why you should eat them all in that greedy way. I wish to goodness you would just go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner first. It's absurd. And besides, the fact of the matter is I've just made arrangements with Dr. Tossable to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, I made arrangements with Dr. Tossable to be christened myself at 5:30, and I will naturally take the name of Earnest. Gwendolyn would wish it. We can't both be christened Earnest. It's absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There is not a single shred of evidence that I've ever been christened by anybody. It is entirely different in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I haven't been christened for years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. It might make you very unwell. you could hardly have forgotten that someone very nearly closely connected to you was very nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill.
But I thought you said that a severe chill was not hereditary.
It used to be, I know. But I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
Algernon, I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you just go?
Well, I haven't quite finished my tea yet. And there's still one muffin left.
The fact that they did not follow us at once into the house, as anyone else would have done, seems to me to show that they have some ounce of shame left.
They've been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't got a cough.
They're looking at us. How dare they?
They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It's the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, I have something very particular to ask of you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolyn, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have an opportunity of meeting you.
His answer certainly seems satisfactory, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't. But that doesn't affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True, in matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it so that you might have an opportunity of coming up to town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. Their answers appear to be quite satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's.
Mr. Moncrief's answer seems to inspire one with absolute credulity.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Yes. I mean, no.
True, I had forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. But which of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Couldn't we say it at the same time?
An excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people.
Your Christian names are still an insurmountable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all? But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake, are you prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am.
To please me, are you ready to face this fearful ordeal?
I am.
How absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes. Where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage that us women know absolutely nothing.
Darling.
Darling.
Lady Bracknell?
Good heavens!
Gwendolyn, what does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Come here. Sit down. Sit down immediately. I was informed, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin. Of course, you will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolyn, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now as regards to Algernon. Algernon,
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
may I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend Mr. Bunbury resides?
No. Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been awfully sudden.
Oh, Bunbury, he was quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage?
Aunt Augusta, I mean he was found out. The doctors found out he could not live. That is what I mean. So he died.
So, I'm glad he made up his mind at the last to some definite course of action and acted under proper medical advice. And now that we have finally gotten rid of this Mr. Bunbury, may I ask, Mr. Worthing, who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding in what seems to me a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I'm engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon?
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know whether there is anything peculiarly exciting in the air in this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that go on seems to me considerably above the proper average. I think some preliminary inquiry on my place would not be out of part. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea that there were any families or persons whose origin was a train depot.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, Southwest, also Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran in Fife.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
Miss Cardew family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, and Markby.
Markby, and Markby? A firm of the very highest position in their profession. So far, I am satisfied.
I also have in my possession, you will be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the German and the English variety.
Ah, life crowded with adventure, I see, though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. Gwendolyn, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I'd better ask you if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, only about 130,000 pounds in the funds. That is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. 130,000 pounds? And in the funds? Miss Cardew seems to me a most attractive young lady now that I look at her. Few girls of present day have any really solid qualities. Any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come over here, dear. Pretty child, your dress is sadly simple, and your hair seems almost as nature might have left it. But we can soon alter all that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a really marvelous result in a very brief space of time. Kindly turn around, sweet child. No, the side view is what I want. Yes, quite what I expected. Algernon.
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, prettiest, most dearest girl I've ever met. And I don't care 2 pence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of high society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Dear child, of course you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend on, but I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I'm not in favor of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot legally marry until she comes of age without my consent. And that consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is extremely, I may almost say an ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but looks everything. What more can one desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew, but I don't approve at all of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew, Algernon? Impossible. He went to Oxford.
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence in London, he obtained admission into my house under the means of false pretenses of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I've just been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of my Perrier Jouret Brut 89 wine I was specially reserving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the course of alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he knew, well aware from the first, that I had no brother, that I never had a brother, and that I do not intend to have a brother, not even of any kind in the future. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I've decided entirely to overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
That is very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come here, sweet child. How old are you, dear?
Well, I am really only 18, but I always admit to 20 when I go to evening parties.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should ever be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, it will not be very long before you're fully of age, so I don't think your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray excuse me, Lady Bracknell, but it is only fair to tell you that according to the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come legally of age till she is 35.
That does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest birth who have of their own free choice remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton is an instance in point. To my knowledge, she has remained 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40. So I see no reason why our dear Cecily should not be even still more attractive at the age you mentioned than she is at present. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Algie, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively. But I cannot wait that long. I hate even waiting 5 minutes for anyone. I'm not punctual myself, I know, but I do like punctuality in others. And waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait until she is 35, a remark which I am bound to say seems to show a somewhat impatient nature, I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will most gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must be quite aware that what you propose is out of the question.
And a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, dear, we have missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more, it might expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christening, sir? Is not that somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age, the idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid of you to be baptized. I will not hear of it.
Am I to understand then that there will be no christenings at all this afternoon?
I don't think that, as things are now, it would be much practical value to either of us, Dr. Chasuble.
I am grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. But as your current mood seems to me peculiarly secular, I will return to the church at once. Indeed, I have just been informed that Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I'm on my way to join her.
Pray allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may prove to be one of vital importance to Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism a female of hideous appearance remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been for the last 3 years Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She is nigh.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, Dr. Chasuble. I have been waiting for you there for the past hour and 3/4.
Prism? Come here, Prism. Prism, where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104 Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, though the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself in the remote corner of Bayswater. It contained a manuscript of a more than revolting 3-volume novel, but the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day that you mention, a day that is forever branded on my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I also had with me a somewhat old but spacious handbag in which I had intended to place a work of fiction that I had written during my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I can never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria. The Brighton line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolyn? Gwendolyn, wait here for me.
If you are not too long, I will wait for you my whole life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Chasuble. I need hardly tell you that in families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They are hardly considered a thing. This noise is extremely unpleasant. It sounds as if he was having an argument. I dislike arguments of any kind. They are always vulgar and often convincing.
Uncle Jack seems to be strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature. Oh, it has stopped now.
I wish he would arrive at some conclusion.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yes, here is the injury it received through the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. Here is the stain on the lining caused by an explosion of a temperance beverage, an incident that occurred at Leamington. And here on the lock are my initials. I'd forgotten that in an extravagant mood I had them placed there. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I am delighted to have it so unexpectedly restored to me. It has been a great inconvenience being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than this handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes. Mother!
Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried.
Unmarried? I do not deny that is a serious blow, but after all, who has the right to cast a stone against one who has already suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Oh, Mother, I forgive you!
Mr. Worthing! Oh. There is some error. There is a lady who can tell you who you really are.
Ow. Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
Algie's elder brother? Then I have a brother after all. I knew I had a brother. I've always said I had a brother. Cecily, how could you have ever doubted that I had a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolyn, my unfortunate brother. Oh, Algie, you young scoundrel, you will have to treat me with a little more respect in the future. You have never behaved to me like a brother in all your life.
Well, not till today, old boy, I admit. I tried my best, however, though I was a little out of practice.
My own one. But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you've become someone else?
Good heavens, quite forgotten that point. Your decision on the subject of my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolyn.
Then the question had better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. At the time when Miss Prism left me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, was lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
And I was christened. That is settled. Now, what name was I given?
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at the present moment recall what the general's Christian name was. We always called him General, but I have no doubt he had one. He was eccentric, I admit, but only in later years, and that was the result of Indian climate and marriage and indigestion and things of that kind.
Algie, can't you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
My dear boy, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear in the army list of the period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta?
The general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life, but I have no doubt his name would appear in any military directory.
The army list of the last 40 years are here. These delightful records should have been my constant study. No. Ah, here it is. Malum, Moxbum, Mangley. What ghastly names they have. Migsby, Mobs, Moncrief, Lieutenant 1840, Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel, General, 1869. Christian names, Earnest John. I always told you, Gwendolyn, my name was Ernest, didn't I? Well, it is Ernest after all. Naturally, it is Ernest.
Yes, I remember now. The general was called Earnest. I knew I had some particular reason for disliking the name.
Ernest, my own Ernest.
Oh, Gwendolyn, it is a terrible thing for a man to find out suddenly that all his life he has been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you ever forgive me?
I can, for I feel that you are sure to change.
My own one.
Letitia.
Frederick, at last!
Cecily, at last.
Gwendolyn, at last.
All right. So we'd like to thank a couple people tonight for doing the show and just some specific leaders that have helped put the show on. So we're going to start with the rose ceremony. So we'd first like to thank Claire Sirota. She was our student director, assistant director, and she's also the senior makeup head. So thank you, Claire. We'd also like to thank our choreographers who put together the beautiful dances, Isabel Turner, Sophia Nava, and Grace Hyatt. And then we'd also like to thank some of our tech and crew. So we'd like to thank Rachel Yee and Chris Cook and Jeff. And you guys can go get your flowers now or later. We can just clap for them. And then we'd also like to thank our amazing director, Mr. Corliss. We'd also like to thank our pit and the wonderful pit director, Mrs. Wickman. We'd like to thank Mr. Turner for teaching us the music. We'd like to thank Tech for helping with all the lights and sound. We'd also like to thank crew for making these beautiful sets and helping put them up during the show. And then last but not least, we want to thank all of you who took the time to watch this show and support us. We really appreciate it. And we'd just like to say thank you, because even in the times of COVID, we were able to pull this off, and you all supported us. So thank you, audience.